This episode of the podcast has been brought to you by Sweet Cheetah Publicity. Sweet Cheetah is an inclusive, socially conscious PR collective that puts their money where their mouth is. They have a current roster of bands that reads like a greatest hits anthology. Brainiac, Catholic School, Jawbox, The New Amsterdams, Oceans in the Sky. I mean, the list goes on and on. They also do PR for record labels such as A La Carte, Arctic Rodeo, Steadfast, Rad Girlfriend, and so many more. How do they pay it forward? How do they put their money where their mouth is? By generating thousands of dollars in annual charitable donations to the likes of Women in Vinyl, Coalition of Communities of Color, the NAACP Legal Defense Fund, and many, many more. The man has the receipts. I've seen them. It is real. The artists, labels, and podcasts Sweet Cheetah works with are curated with an eye on working primarily with friends. You could find Sweet Cheetah on all of the social media platforms, be it Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. Just look for Sweet Cheetah PR and they will be there. He's been Tim, I've been Peter, and Sweet Cheetah has been beautiful. Hello and welcome to another edition of the Book of Very, Very Bad Things podcast. I'm your host, Peter, and I am still here. Somehow, I'm still here. On tonight's episode, I give to you Liam Frost of the group Oceans in the Sky. Oceans in the Sky has been together for quite a few years now, but Parallels, the new record, just dropped pretty recently on Heading East Records. We're talking about an amalgamation of everything from chamber pop to power pop to pop punk. You notice how pop keeps coming in there, and that's not a bad thing, folks. This is pop in the best way possible, in the Beatles of it all. We really love this record over here, and if you haven't already heard it, I believe you will as well. I had a great time with Liam. Really fun, interesting, cultured, worldly human. A lot of just great insights into creating music and living a transcontinental life. More about him in a second. I know people get a little bummed out on the whole self-promotion aspect of advertising, me advertising myself, but hey, it's my show. I'm not trying to get you to give me money. I just want people to listen. You know the rigmarole: share, subscribe, blah 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 blah. If you dig me, let people know you dig me. That's all I'm going to say about that. Done. I do want you all to know something, though. I've been at this for, 2 years. 2 years. And, you know, it takes a lot of effort on my part just to get one episode a week put out. That's why sometimes it comes out on Friday, sometimes on Sunday. I can't really control that. Life happens, and I apologize for that. But I do love doing it. And I hope you love it as much as I do. So I will be sharing with you some of the singles from this record, Parallels. They're all great. But right off the top, I want to share with you my favorite, entitled Taipei. This has all of the melancholy, yet all of the bombast and the musicianship. All of the strengths of Oceans in the Sky are present in this track. I hope you enjoy it.
The windows rattling, a typhoon hit Taipei. I'm anxious and writing. I've been awake for so many days. I've talked with black suits, fast talking, cut up tongues. They want my potential, signed away with bleeding arms. I can't stop listening. I wanna make my family proud, but I can't sell to industry, 'cause this is something I have to do for myself. I'm so scared that I won't reach my potential. I write so many songs, I don't think I'm good enough. It might just be too late to reach my potential, but I won't know, not for sure, if I'm in Taipei. If I'm in Taipei. I love this city, my home on the island in the sun. You are a part of me, but it's time for me to move on. Goodbye to my girl. I'll go to New York, 'cause it's time to make a change in my life. I'm so scared that I won't reach my potential. I write so many songs, I don't think I'm good enough. It might just be too late to reach my potential, but I won't know, not for sure, if I'm in Taipei. I left my heart in Taipei. 我把心留在台北。
Dear God. What a song.
Left my heart in Taipei.
And with that, I give to you Liam Frost, Oceans in the Sky, on the book of Very, Very Bad Things podcast. So this is your maiden voyage, your first podcast experience, correct?
Yeah.
My
Excited
goodness.
to be here.
I'm excited to have you, and to be anyone's first anything. That it's pretty incredible.
Oh yeah.
So I want to just jump right in and kind of ask you, like, parallels. This is a record that does not marry one sound, one style. The only thing that unites it is your voice, like very mellifluous, very, sweeping in scope. I kind of have to wonder, like, your musical journey. Where did it start? Like when you were a kid, when you first fell in love with music and said to yourself, "This is what I want." What's that aha moment for you?
Sure. Yeah, it started really young. So have to give a lot of credit to my parents, who are both classical musicians, actually. And so hearing them play and sing beautiful music all the time, I was enamored and could not wait to start playing music. So I remember being really little, being told I couldn't learn piano yet because my fingers were literally too small. So from a very early age, I was enamored with music and instruments. Um, the first moment, um, the first thing I fell in love with in terms of being a fan was probably Weezer's Blue album.
Yeah.
Um, and that definitely had a major effect on me, and as did, a ton of records as a kid. But yeah, got into listening to a lot of cool stuff really early. You know, I might have been in first grade. Um, and it's all because of my older brother, who was also into music very early, but was a couple of years older than me. Um, and yeah, we were just obsessed. We're not the tape generation, but we were listening to tapes,
Yeah.
uh, CDs. I don't know what year CDs came around, but
No,
yeah. So
I think
we were on
the
it.
80s. I think the late 80s. I mean,
Okay,
I didn't get a CD player until 1991. And as you
right.
can see behind me, I never really got too deeply into CDs. I was a
Yeah,
vinyl guy because that was my
yeah.
I'm going to be 47. That was my generation. You know what I mean?
Gotcha.
But like you mentioned the Blue album. I mean,
Yes.
I was already in college when that came out, and there was something very, uh, you know, um, it bridged a gap, right? It was between it took aspects of the Clash and the Sex Pistols and aspects of the Beatles and Buddy
Yep.
Holly, and it was a great cross section of what the spirit of rock and roll meant to a lot of different generations. But Rivers Cuomo has this knack for distilling the best parts of all of these things and making them austere and real and hard on sleeve. I don't know if
Yes.
he still does that because
Yeah.
I'm not shitting on Weezer's later
Sure. Yeah,
period, but the first two records were really magical.
definitely.
um I could see how that could be a great jumping off point for what you're doing, but I can also see how your parents could be a very big uh part of that puzzle as far as your sound's concerned, because it's not classical, but there are aspects of it that you can glean that from. You know,
Definitely.
I'm the son of a jazz drummer. Jazz was more my part of my DNA, but
Right.
it's not in my music. I can tell there's a classical element to what you're doing. So when you first started playing music, how old were you? Like truly?
Um, I was I would have to ask my parents. I was probably 5 or 6. Um, little kid
Yeah.
at the piano. Yeah. So that was, my parents were my first teachers, music teachers. Both my parents play piano. Um, and yeah, so very few memories of my early childhood, but definitely remember sitting at the piano.
So when you're putting this record together, did you have like, a past in playing with other bands before you did this?
Totally. I'll say I didn't play in a ton of bands. I definitely played in a lot of chamber music groups and orchestras, and also jazz band. I played a lot of jazz too. Um, so played a lot of music with different people. Definitely played in some more pop rock bands. And basically, this project started about a decade ago now, and really just came from being in college and playing music with friends, and having a good time playing one-off shows and covering other bands, and throwing in an original or two of mine. But my friends were just not as serious about writing songs and wanted to get high and jam, which, college, I understand.
Sure.
But so that's kind of how it happened, where I was like, all right, well, let me try writing all the parts, and then my friends will just play these songs with me because I need to write songs. And so that's how it started. It is, I guess it's a solo project. It feels more like a collective at this point, but that's how it started.
And there seems to be like an overarching theme lyrically to everything that you've done on this record. Was that like something you'd set out to do, or did it just sort of come together that way?
It mostly came together that way. I write a lot of songs about looking for my place in the world, looking for a sense of belonging, whether it's in people or a place.
Fear
I
of
think that,
not living up to your potential, which
yes,
that comes into play quite prominently.
definitely. And so that's just naturally what I wrote about, because that's how I was feeling. And especially, I'm half Taiwanese, so I've spent a lot of my life in Taiwan and a lot here, obviously. And so that's sort of a feeling I've always felt. And it's also very tied in with music and how music makes me feel at home, and how a lot of my favorite artists, that's how they made me feel. So a lot of it is singing about music. But yeah, it kind of happened. And then when I had like a couple more songs to write, I was like, man, I'm realizing I'm kind of writing about a similar theme here. Let's keep it going for the last couple tracks, making them different, but in that general theme. And so it kind of happened naturally.
And musically speaking, and there's not one song that's exactly the same. They fit together well, but you're not following a formula, because there are like these really melodic, almost punk anthems and pop punk type anthems mixed in with what could be construed as chamber music almost. And then the acoustic tracks, like everything does not marry a specific sound, that but it works together, and that's important. You don't find a whole lot of that ever in any era
Yep.
or genre of music, and you could forgive people for that. I mean, Social Distortion's one of my favorite bands. You buy the next one that comes out, it's pretty much gonna be sounding like, a mixture of punk and 50s rock and roll. You can count on that. That's great,
Right.
but this isn't that kind of group.
Yeah.
That's what I'm getting from this, just from the first record.
Totally.
So when you're taking this and trying to get it released, how do you kind of get noticed for that?
Yeah. Yeah, it was interesting when I was pitching to labels. It took me a couple days to really figure out how I was gonna describe the album, because it's hard to sum up
Yeah, it is.
in a single genre, or it is countless genres. I think, yeah, like you said, each song is different from the last. I think the reason they work together, obviously, besides just being me writing them and having a certain melodic style, and obviously my voice being a constant throughout. I think, with a couple exceptions, regardless of whether it's more pop or more punk, more synth or more guitar, I love high energy music.
Yeah.
And so I think that is another thing that ties it together. Definitely, how did I describe it when I was pitching? It's a little while ago now, but something like, countless um, genres, but punk energy throughout, high energy throughout, and focus on catchy melodies and uh, a mixture of sounds. Yeah,
Yeah, and when you approached it, like you caught a lot of ears really quickly because like it bubbled up to me very very fast. As soon as like it was before the record even came out, but like
yeah,
people were filtering this name my way constantly, and I was like, well, play it for me. Oh, I don't have it, but I heard it,
yeah,
and
yeah,
okay, well, play it for me. So
yeah.
when it finally did make it my way, I don't know what I was expecting exactly because no one could tell me.
Right.
And I think that's a strength because there's no preconceived notion. You know what I mean? Like
Right.
no one could say, "Oh, they sound like the Dillinger Escape Plan," or they sound like,
Right.
Public Enemy or whoever. You
Yep.
know, it had its own it was resonating with its own vibration. That is something that comes along only once in a great while. Like OK Computer, when it came out, when I was trying to explain that to my friends, they're like, "Oh, so is it like the Bends or is it like Pablo Honey?" I was like, "No, it's more like if Pink Floyd were smoking crack and reading Philip K. Dick novels."
Sure.
Like, well, that doesn't help me at all. I said, "Well, I can't help
Yeah.
you then." Sometimes there's something almost inquantifiable about great music. Like try and explain Ornette Coleman to someone who's never heard jazz,
Right.
or break down what modal jazz is about to the uninitiated. Like, hey,
Totally.
you've never heard Kind of Blue, you're never going to know what this means.
Yep.
That I don't get that too much, so it's pretty exciting to me. Um, is that kind of why you named it Parallels?
So the name Parallels came from a couple things. Lyrically, like you kind of put your finger on, a lot of it is there's definitely some similar themes throughout, and a lot of it is that feeling of searching for a sense of belonging in the world. And I wrote half of the record in Taipei when I lived there, and half of it in New York. So, sort of about the parallels in my life. Just no matter where I am, trying to figure out where I should be. So lyrically, it's that, and um, similarly, musically, it wasn't something I set out to do, um, but I realized one of the most exciting things for me as a songwriter, as a producer, is when I find two things that on paper should not go together, but they actually work really well in parallel to each other. And especially with more Chinese sounds, instruments. My friend Wan Wan plays this instrument called pipa
Yeah.
on a bunch of songs on the record. Really proud of our work together on that. And I love a lot of Japanese music too. The more synth poppy songs are maybe more influenced by Japanese pop than American pop. Um, and just, you know,
Uh, Japanese
throwing.
that
Sorry, go ahead.
that Japanese pop is so gothy in its delivery. There's something really uh there's something up in Japan because when they make music that maybe originated in the States, they actually expound upon it in such a way that makes it undeniably Japanese. Japanese hardcore is the most extreme version of hardcore on planet Earth. The same
Is
thing
it?
with any post-punk or goth music that gets translated by the Japanese. It becomes something other. It's so incredible.
Yeah. So yeah, I think melodically, Japanese pop music is so interesting. It's so, and so much of it is because of the language. They can stretch syllables in a way that we can't in English. And so they can have these very, staccato, like very just weird melodies that could not work in English and would sound silly if you sang it in English, but sounds so cool in Japanese. And production wise, really, really cool stuff. Yeah.
And on this record, not all of the lyrics are in English, which it's fun for me because you know what I mean? Like I like a lot of Japanese and like songs in Mandarin, things of that nature. I dig it, but kind of tell me about that bent for you, like where you were coming from with all of that.
Yeah. To be honest, not too much thought went into went into that part of it.
Right.
I was living in Taiwan. Um, I don't know, maybe 70-80% of my life was in Chinese.
Yeah.
So it just made sense to try to do certain songs made sense in Chinese, certain songs didn't. And also to talking about melody, like some songs work better in Chinese than English and vice versa. Taipei, I thought I wrote in Chinese because I was like, well, this is the song to write in Chinese, but there's too much. I don't remember exactly why, but it just didn't sound as good in Chinese. And so I wrote, mostly English and kept the few lines in Chinese that sounded great and made sense in Chinese and hit harder. But yeah, mainly just because of living life in different languages and that being a part of me, and clearly I like challenging myself to try different things. So things like that I see as a fun challenge.
Now that when you say Chinese, though, are we talking Mandarin? Which language are we speaking of?
Yes, so I speak Mandarin.
Yeah.
There's a little bit of Japanese on the record. I speak Japanese too, but not nearly as well as Mandarin.
But you're a polyglot. That's impressive. My wife is a polyglot as well, and it's daunting because having grown up speaking a little, like more than a little Polish,
Yeah.
as a child, and losing it
Yeah.
due to a lack of practice. I almost feel like you're not better, but certainly you have a leg up on me. That you can speak all these
No,
different
no.
languages. Like my wife speaks Spanish and Portuguese and very intellectual human being, very, very
Yeah,
adept.
sure.
I'm lucky I have an English degree.
Yeah.
But I can say with a great degree of certainty too that there is a very big market for not only music sung in Mandarin or Japanese, but all of Asia. There, Korea even. There's a market for that in the United States that I find surprising and refreshing. There's been like a major rise of it. I think it started in the early 2000s when bands like Deer and Gray became popular, but now it's the pop thing too. It's wild to see.
Yeah.
I don't even know what to blame for it.
Yeah. I think there's so much amazing music out there, and I think your average American in the 90s, 2000s, hears a song in a different language, and at that time it was like not a cool thing. It's different times.
Yeah.
It wasn't cool when I was little to speak Chinese, and it's cool now. So I think America has gotten a little more open-minded, even though it doesn't seem like it. Overall.
No, I watched it backpedal quite horribly over the past few years, but
Yeah. Yes. In some ways, and I think this is one of those ways. You see a lot of Spanish music is huge. Korean music, obviously. Haven't seen too much Chinese and Japanese music blow up, but hopefully, because there's such awesome stuff. It is a little weirder compared to, you know.
Think of like the classical music from both aforementioned countries. They have a very unique style, and there's it almost smacks of their cultures, especially when considering China and Japan because they were adversarial. Um, even to the untrained ear, their classical musics may sound similar to someone who doesn't know much about music, but when you really
Right.
listen to it, they're vastly dissimilar. It's like the difference between Rachmaninoff and Wagner. They're both dark, but
Yeah.
Wagner is nationalistic and like the soundtrack to the Nazis, whereas
Yep.
Rachmaninoff, that's actual depressed, like that's someone staring into the void and realizing the void staring back at them. That's how I kind of like explain him. um those are the dissimilarities between the two. It's
Totally.
to me it makes sense that that classical kind of flavor comes into play, um even more so towards the back end of Parallels. There's something, it becomes more orchestral at points. um was that natural instruments, or did you synthesize them? How did that come into, how did you kind of put that together?
Yeah. Trying to think of the back half. Um, you know, Definitely it's much more acoustic in terms of, you know, definitely plenty of electric guitar, but much more real instruments. Yeah, it wasn't with the sequencing, it was trying to remember, but it felt like the sort of bigger, poppier songs at the start and getting darker and more acoustic. Um, Felt, maybe it was my bias of that's mostly how the songs were written. Whether, that's a sign of being not as happy the past few years or not, I don't know. But definitely, I love all kinds of music, and uh, definitely a big uh, part of what I love. Music in general is pretty finger picking guitar, and for whatever reason, those songs seem to work better closer together and towards the end. And In terms of the arrangements and why they seem more orchestral, and um, I think that's just more where my head's been at the past few years is you know thinking of strings and Chinese instruments, and so that's kind of how it happened. Yeah.
There's a very maudlin like there's a tactile sadness to the latter half of the record too, that I mean it's well served by that orchestral acoustic vibe, but
Yeah.
there's uplift in here too that I think is pretty obvious, because I mean you have these very triumphant moments in even the darkest songs. I can tell kind of, you did like the almost angels and airwaves kind of vibe or what have you. Um, but I think more so there's a lot of like almost glam rock somewhere in there. And I'm talking 70s glam, like T-Rex, David Bowie type stuff. Does that figure pretty largely into your purview?
um Definitely Bowie. And more, I'm trying to think of specific inspirations for those songs. Definitely there's this one Japanese producer that maybe has influenced me, is up there in terms of the more electronic synth pop stuff. Who goes, his name is Yasutaka Nakata, and he's just an insanely talented producer, and a lot of weird, cool sounds, and endless hooks, and a lot of really cool kind of 70s guitars, dancey but rock pop, but also has kind of a little bit sad melodies, stuff like that. So definitely him, and some newer artists. I'm definitely influenced by Passion Pit,
No,
and Phoenix. I think are really cool too, for that side of it. Definitely big influences. Yeah.
it's kind of a shame seeing, you know, bands like them, like they're still around, like Passion Pit or
Yep.
MGMT. That they were
Yep.
they were fantastic, but they flared up, and then as the cycles are, that
Yes.
you watch them kind of like float off into the distance. What's upsetting, I think, about that is just the fact that there was such an immense talent in that little blip where those bands were starting to flare up, and
Right.
just as quickly attention spans shifted. I'm not going to beleaguer the point or belittle the bands that replaced them, or the musicians or artists that replaced them, but it seemed to me like it was a little short lived. You know what I mean? Like, because like they were in the 2000s. I'm not going to talk about my era because we know I'm old, but like in the like the early to mid 2000s, you had that like next British rock movement, and then it was like, the pop punk thing got really big, and the screamo thing, or whatever you want to call it.
Yep.
And then indie rock got really awesome again, and you had
Yep.
MGMT, you had Passion Pit, you had Phoenix, and all those sorts of bands. It seems to me like attention spans are shorter and shorter and shorter. How do you think an artist can like really find staying power in this climate?
Yeah. Good question. It's just kind of how it goes, right? With you know, um, I'm put in this kind of pop punk emo camp some of the time, put in the more pop electronic synth pop some of the time, and definitely with the pop punk emo, that was not popular for a while there,
Yeah.
and now it seems to be coming back. So I think you just make what you love. None of these songs I made, it's great that pop punk and stuff seems to be coming back. That didn't affect my songwriting at all.
Yeah.
You can't go by what's popular. You just have to make what speaks to you. And I think, I mean, it's tough because people trying to work, people trying to make a career out of it. So do whatever's right for you, obviously. But you know, I have a very specific songwriting style that's very tied to melody, um, and whatever melody comes out of me, I try to build the world around that. So, "Song of the Summer" is a track on the record that's the most pop song, probably very synth pop dance type of stuff, very J-pop influenced. That started on guitar. That was like, could have been a cool pop punk song.
Yeah.
That's how it started and came to me. But you got to look at it objectively and be like, what kind of melody is this? What kind of world is gonna make this melody hopefully the best or close to the best that I can make it. So that's my style, and
In service of the song, really.
in service of the song, in service of the melody. So yeah, I've never made a decision of like, let me make what's popular, but like you said, Radiohead with the Bends, like they didn't love that record, and that was the record that started their career, and now they're crazy respected. So there's no right or wrong way, just whatever. You just make the decisions that feel right at the time.
I'll never understand why they don't like that record. That's when I started to like
It's
them.
a great record. Yeah.
I don't like their first album.
Yeah.
I don't like it. Well, that has to do with semantics, because at that time period, it was the early 90s. I was a hardcore kid. You know what I
Sure.
mean? I was listening to Minor Threat and Gorilla Biscuits. I didn't care about a like proto grunge band or whatever they were considering themselves at the time, and they probably didn't consider themselves that, but it didn't strike me as anything too artistic. Then that comes along, and I'm like, well, wait a minute. They're into some cool stuff here. They're not just trying to be the British answer to this, that, or the other. And with your record, as we've been kind of like dancing around, there are elements of the, like, I guess, melodic pop punk thing or whatever in it, but to me, it doesn't really align with that. To me, it aligns more with something more progressive, more maybe like at the drive-in when they were really starting to feel themselves, like, because and not in sound, just in the fact that it doesn't care about what it sounds like. I don't think you care about what it aligns with. I think you care about how it makes you feel and how it sounds, because you're a producer too, correct?
Yes. Yeah, so I produced most of the songs on the record, or co-produced. And yeah, I mean, I admire bands like you were saying who have a sound, who you know what kind of sound you're going to get from them, and it's your favorite band and they deliver and it's amazing. I part of me wishes I could do that and do a full record of one sound. I think that's really cool. I think I read Brian Eno was saying how, either you're a farmer or a cowboy. And, either you have your crops and you're just trying to make the best tomato, and each year it gets a little better until you're making the best, tomato you could make, or you're a cowboy and, you just want to explore. You just want to try different things. And weirdly, I feel bad about creating something that feels similar to something I created before. I'm like, what am I doing repeating myself here?
Yeah.
So it's way more exciting and interesting to me to try to make something completely different and be there's something about being an amateur, about not really knowing what you're doing, that brings out really interesting creative choices, I think. And
that's the mother of the true, like, artist, really just feeling around in the dark until something makes sense. And there is merit, like you said, to making just the best verse, chorus, verse that you can, and churning that out and making it better every time. But in all reality, all of my favorite artists, musicians, they did something different every time. That's why Kinda Blue doesn't sound like Bitches Brew.
Yep.
You know what I mean? That's one's a quantum leap from the other. And not to beat Miles Davis to death, but like, that is a career trajectory that one couldn't possibly set a watch to. You know what I
Yep.
mean? Like that's just tectonic shift on tectonic shift. Same thing with Ornette Coleman. Same thing with John Coltrane. You know, these are people that took giant steps, as it were. You know what I mean?
Yep.
These are
Totally.
people they didn't care about what everyone would think of it. They cared about the adventure of it, how it would make them feel. I get that from this. I don't know if everybody's going to get that from this because I'm a massive music nerd, but I really did get that from this, even within the confines of the album. You know, that's important. And I think it's about emotion for you too, in a big way, which kind of leads me to the only question that I have pre-prescribed for every artist. It's the
Sure.
only thing that comes every episode, and that is, what is it that inspires an existential terror in you, that dread?
I think about for sure. Um, yeah, I mean, once because I produce these songs, now that they're all, done for a while now, it's all just like what no chances taken. This is how I meant for these songs to turn out. But definitely at the time, I had the thoughts of you know, our people are going to be like, what's with the Chinese song? What's with, this sound that I haven't heard? I'm a pop punk guy. Why is there a pop song on here? Definitely that feeling of, um, like, is it going to be a miss for most people because it's too diverse? But and I had some anxiety about putting out this larger body of work where it's a lot of extremely personal things lyrically. Um, but at the end of the day, you know, that's just how I do things. There was never, when I was actually making it, there was never a question. It was after it was done that I was like, oh man, I'm really doing this here.
Yeah, well,
you
I
know,
mean, there's that really big aspect of like disrobing in front of strangers that comes with being a musician. I mean,
yeah,
I too am a musician.
yeah,
I'm not at your level, and I'm much older than you. But there's that part of you that you're giving something of yourself that's so raw and so precious, right? And you're unveiling it. You're laying yourself bare in front of the world at large. That can be daunting. That can
yeah,
be terrifying. It takes a certain amount of gumption to allow yourself to be that vulnerable in front of the entire world, and doing it with a zeal and a sense of melodicism. It's a strength that I kind of have to applaud you for, because like I said, when I'd heard this initially, I was probably expecting something a little bit more by the numbers, and it took me probably about a minute and a half to figure out that that was not the case. Which is a big compliment, because as you look behind me, I own about 7,800 pieces of music on vinyl.
oh my god,
Yeah,
wow.
I have a sickness, but I've been collecting since the 80s. Uh,
Very cool.
there's one thing that's congruent throughout the entirety of my collection, and that is individualism. I can't just buy anything anymore because space is at a premium. I bought your record.
Oh, thank you.
It that To me, that is the ultimate cosign. Like, I didn't go out looking for a
Mhm.
promo of this. I bought it. You
Sure.
know what I
Yeah.
mean? So if my listeners can take anything away from that, I mean, I paid for it. Man. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
To me, it was that worth it, and it was worth it in the same way that the Benz was worth it. That I can't really draw too many parallels to it, because it does you don't have many peers, and that's a strength. Taking that into consideration, what has the kind of temperature been like? Have people been really responding to it?
Yeah, definitely. It's been interesting to see, and I think a lot of people sort of have their favorite songs. I don't know if there's a ton of people who love the album as a whole as of 2 months since release. Hopefully, but either way, very interesting to hear, and warms my heart to see that it's meaningful to people, and that's ultimately the goal, right? Beyond my own just necessary exercise of writing songs, the fact that anybody can feel anything that is beyond just something in the background is what it's all about. And yeah, I mean, I don't want to sound braggy. How do I summarize this? Without going into too much detail, but we went on tour in January, and there were kids singing along, and the record had been out for a few days, and that was mind blowing. That was just like, almost, had to stop performing. It was obviously, didn't get anywhere near that, but it was just like, this is wild. So yeah, lots of people listening, a good amount of people sending messages and stuff, and I don't know how all of those people feel about it, obviously, but the people who have reached out, and I'm sure some of those people who love the record will listen to this, and I appreciate you a ton. Yeah.
And I could say very honestly that Ghost, Worlds, Taipei, and In the End, the last 4 tracks, are my favorite songs on the record. But I have a very difficult time kind of like taking those parts out of the record. I like the record. I'm from an era that we were listeners of albums. We weren't.
Yep.
We didn't just like, oh, I like this song and that song, because if you only liked 1 or 2 songs, guess what? You didn't have the money to buy the whole album.
Right.
So
exactly.
you weren't going to buy it.
Yep.
That is my generation. And the fact that you're reaching my generation is very cool too. But I'm an album oriented era.
Totally.
And we prized that as a badge of honor. Like this whole album is that good that I had to buy it.
Yep.
There's not a whole lot of that kind of thing. It's a very singles driven era, more so than ever.
Yep.
This is an album for people who like albums, and that sounds trite, but in all honesty, that's a big deal. I do kind of I wonder, and it's totally off topic.
Sure.
But is Liam your birth name?
Liam is my birth name. Yeah.
That is. So I'm half Irish. So to me, that is like near and dear to me. That like I almost want to call you Lem, because if your name is Liam and you're Irish, your name is Lem. But yeah, I was, and your last name's Frost.
My last name's Frost.
That is absolutely like in all-time coolest names. That is like that's up there. That is
appreciate it.
Up there. So both of your parents are Chinese?
No, so my dad is white, and part Irish. I don't know what percentage, but the names actually mostly came from a book that I should read, but every time I I only think about it every few years when someone asks me how I got my name. But yeah, there are two brothers, Connor and Liam. I believe it's called the Trinity, which sounds very religious, but I have no idea. But yeah, my brother is Connor and I'm Liam. They just really like the names.
Oh, that's very cool. I having grown up with more than a few friends who were born in or are of Chinese descent. I mean, one's name is Quoc, one's name is Tron.
Sure.
You know, pretty common names there. Here,
Yep.
not so much, but you know, that's what comes to mind for most people. So when I hear a name Liam, it just, I don't know, it feels at home to me because I've been to Ireland a few times. I've met my family in Ireland, and there's probably about 15 Liams.
Yeah, it's a big name, Mugler.
It really is.
Yeah.
But that was off topic. Where are you at with music videos now? You have 3, right?
Good question. We have we have 2
you have 2.
official ones, and then a bunch of like visualizers, animations. But two proper official videos that are out, and there will be more, but not in the immediate future. Yeah.
And your publicist is Tim, correct?
Yep.
Yep. He's one of my best friends.
Oh yeah.
Tim and I are very close. And I have to tell you, I would have been interviewing you had he not been.
Sure.
Because I really did dig this. And I wonder, since you are such a prolific songwriter, how close are you to the follow-up record?
Whew, good question. Yeah, I am not close. I feel like I can tell you some information about the next thing. There will be some bonus tracks that are that didn't make the record that I'll put out in some way, and we're discussing the best way to do that. So that's the next release, and then yeah, I've got a few songs going. I decided to not pressure myself to put out a full length for the next one. I'd love to if it feels right, and obviously I made an album in an age of not making albums. I love albums. That's if I were able to do music all of the time, there would be no question. Yeah, part of me wants to do, what my label mate Fred did, and boss Fred Mascherino, of The Color Fred, who put out an incredible album last year called A Year and Change.
Yep.
And they did a song a month. And so I feel like that would be a fun thing to do and put less pressure on myself to release this finished body of work, and just not put so much pressure on myself for the next one, while of course taking each song, treating each song with a ton of care and whatever the song needs. But that's where my head's at. We'll see what the next release becomes. I have a few cool things I'm working on, but maybe not a full length for the next one. Maybe something like what Fred did.
Yeah, well, he attacked that, I think, in the right way too. He just kind of let it be what it wanted to be. It's not as if we're not viewing a full album as 10 or more songs anymore. I mean, we have examples of everyone from Kanye West to Nas to, like so many groups a 5 or 6 song record being
Right.
a complete work.
Yeah.
I think that's okay. I think that's more than okay. As long as they're of a same time period, same mood, or era, or what have you, as long as they're meant to be together,
Right.
it's an album, man.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, I'm trying to think of a really great example, like Led Zeppelin Coda. That was an
Mm,
8-song record.
right.
No one questioned that. No one did. It was Led
Yeah.
Zeppelin. They could do what they wanted. But
Yeah.
why couldn't that be the full thought? Why could there's no ellipsis at the end of that? This is what it was, beginning to end.
Totally.
There it is. I think that's a beautiful thing. And I guess my last kind of like question would be, what would you like everyone to walk away from this record with?
Oh, yeah. Uh, I feel like just hopefully they, and I put it in the liner notes, something along the lines of, I just hope it makes them feel something. I can't claim to, when I was writing this stuff, I wasn't thinking for a moment, like, you know, is this gonna make someone feel sad or happy, and that sounds selfish, but songwriting's just my way of processing what's happening in my life and what's going on around me. um, and so I can't hope anyone comes away with it with anything. Whatever makes them feel. Hopefully, I think it's a record that makes you feel something. And so hopefully it makes most people feel something, and has some kind of impact, good or bad, on their lives.
It made me
You
feel.
know?
It kind of made me feel everything from jubilation to grief. There is an arc to it that there's ebbs and flows, and that's fun. That makes for a very tactile listening experience to glean so many different emotions and to really get a sense of a journey from the album, which is what makes an album oriented group or project make sense to people. uh, there's an emotional attachment to it because there is that entire story arc, and that was so much fun for me, I have to tell you, and I will carry it with me. And I'm very excited for this album. I'm so glad it's a thing in the ether that people get to experience. And when the next thing happens, would you be so kind as to come back on here and talk to me again?
Of course, man. Wonderful to meet you, and thank you for having me. Thank you for buying the record. I'm sorry we kind of skipped past that. That means a ton to me. And yeah, I think maybe we are slightly different generations, but we're definitely on the same page in terms of music fandom, and it's about the album for me, and that's how I made the record for you know the kid in me who bought Weezer Blue 3 times because I listened to it too much and it kept breaking. Um, you know, so for it to reach people like you and people who have the attention span to sit down and listen to an album, and um, that's the hope, is for it to reach real music fans and musicians and people who you know uh hopefully will appreciate the album as a whole.
Yeah.
But like I said, can't hope for anything, can hope for things, can't expect anything.
Right. But
Yeah.
I think you're on the right track. So I am expecting great things, and I hope great things for you.
Appreciate you, Peter. Thank you.
All right, my brother. Listen, I will talk to you again soon.
Sounds good.
All right, brother.
All right, take it easy.
Later on. Thus ends another interesting and soulful conversation with a musician who I respect and admire. Liam's incredible. To just share some time with someone who has the wherewithal and the talent to create something so diverse and vast in scope, it's just humbling. I hope you all enjoyed spending time with Liam. I sure did, obviously. I hope you enjoy the show. I hope you enjoy all of it, all of the people that I bring on here, all of the interesting cast of characters that I've amassed over the past 2 years of this little experiment of mine. I hope you come back. I hope you send some people my way. I hope you buy my compilation, the soundtrack to the podcast when it comes out. It's taken a little bit longer than I wanted it to, but, you know, I'm one guy. I have kids and a 40-hour work week, and then I have another side business, then I have this, and hey, man, I'm doing what I can to, you know, make the dream work here. He's been Liam. I've been Peter. You've been beautiful. And from 3:33 a.m. Studios, this has been the Book of Very, Very Bad Things podcast. Take care of each other, everyone. Good night.
If I went back to New York, I could never not see you. Damn, you walked away from the dream. I walked away on the ghost. I hate that I still think of when you were mine. All the lights dancing, lives intertwined. Okay, tadaima, amaikimochi, life so easy.